Yeah. Hey guys, what's going on? It's me, Jay. Here to talk a little bit about Candace Owens. Candace Owens Farmer, now the number one streamer in the entire world with 3.6 million subscribers and daily downloads each and every day, surpassing even Ben Shapiro. I have the statistics right here. Ben Shapiro daily downloads. Ben Shapiro only gets 31,100 uh, downloads each and every day with only a 689th percentile download. So Candace Owens' numbers triple Ben Shapiro. Even though when she left the Daily Wire uh, last year, they predicted that she was going to fail, that she was going to crumble, that they were the reason why Candace Owens was popular. Now, to go a little bit over it, why she left the Daily Wire, what was the reasoning behind her departure from the Daily Wire? Basically, she departed from the orthodoxy of the Daily Wire. See, because Ben Shapiro, for all his posturing and for all his belief falsely that his movement represents free speech, that he represents the diversity of ideas, the free marketplace of ideas, to steal a phrase from Dave Rubin, he didn't. When it came to October 7th and questioning the narrative of October 7th, 2023, and what really happened, just looking into this, just asking questions, as it were, not even coming to conclusions, because when Candace was on the Daily Wire, she wasn't even coming to conclusions. She was just simply asking the questions, posing a theory. Ben Shapiro would not allow that. And it's like that with everybody on the Daily Wire. The Daily Wire is basically a dictatorship. What Ben Shapiro says goes. Nick Fuentes' jokes, the skit, "Get back to work, Matt Walsh, get back to work." Because that's exactly what it is. Matt Walsh, they went a round table one time, and Matt Walsh questioned Ben Shapiro, and immediately Ben Shapiro snaps back, and Matt Walsh, like the little pussy that he is, crawls into his corner and says nothing to Ben Shapiro. He didn't say anything to him. Why? Because they don't want to be fired like Candace Owens. But Candace Owens, she was brave. She came out and she started to question the narrative. And when she started to question the narrative, then everybody turned on her. They started to call her an anti Semite. They started to say she was evil. They started to blacklist her. But hey, that's what you trained her for, right? You loved it when she questioned the narrative of Black Lives Matter, right? You loved it when she questioned the narrative of George Floyd. You loved it when she questioned the narrative of Breonna Taylor, right? You loved it then. You thought it was just having an open discussion, questioning, the presuppositions, questioning the status quo. You were all for free speech, right? So free speech on certain things, right? But as Ben Shapiro has said on Megyn Kelly's show, that was beyond the Overton window. What was beyond the Overton window, Ben? What? Questioning October 7th, talking about the historicity of the event that predated October 7th, because October 7th didn't happen in a vacuum, Ben Shapiro, and you know this because you're an Orthodox Jew and your wife is an Israeli. You know what I mean? You understand that the entire history for over 100 years of conflict between the Palestinians and the Israelis, the result of that and the result of the mistreatment of the Palestinians caused October 7th, right? You understand that. You understand that Hamas didn't attack people on the Nova Music Festival for no reason, right? And you understand that Hamas didn't exist for no reason. That Hamas is, in Arabic, is the Islamic resistance movement. What are they resisting? Are they simply resisting you because, as you and other Zionist supporters make it out, just as simply for being Jewish? No, they're attacking you because you came first, right? Um, during the American Civil War, oftentimes uh, Confederate soldiers would respond to Union soldiers when Union soldiers say, "Well, why are you fighting us? Why are you rebelling against our rule of centralized government?" They would say, "Well, we're attacking you because you attacked us first. We're attacking you because you're here. You're here invading our homes. You're here invading our places, and you're trying to, overtake us and trying to tell us what to do, trying to bully us, as it were." And that's just exactly what the Israelis have done for over 100 years with the Palestinians, right? But the disingenuous argument that Ben Shapiro and the supporters of Zionists, both Jewish people and Christian people like Matt Walsh and Andrew Klavan and Michael Knowles, what they don't tell you is that the history of it. They just focus in on the attack on October 7th, and they say October 7th, the largest attack on the Jewish people since World War II, since the Holocaust, right? Another Shoah. But why is it another Shoah, Ben Shapiro? What happened before that? What preceded that? And then they'll tell you, oh, well, Israel's not to blame. We left Gaza in 2005, unilaterally, both sides of the Israeli parliament, right? Yes, that is true. They did. But what else did they do? Did they bombard the Israelis? Did the Israelis bombard the Palestinians on Operation Cast Lead in 2009? Did they bombard the Palestinians again on Operation Protective Edge in 2014? Have they blockaded Palestine from getting any Gaza specifically from getting any resources, thereby starving the populace? The answer is yes. So they left, but then they also prevented the Palestinians from surviving and thriving on their own, specifically in Gaza. Why? Because Palestinians exercised democracy. They practiced democracy. Supposedly Israel and the United States are democracies. Are they not, Ben Shapiro? So in a democracy, if the majority of people vote for something, then that becomes law. Well, I hate to tell you this, but in 2006, the majority of the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip voted for Hamas to be their government. Now, you could say that Hamas is evil, right? You could say Hamas are terrorists. You could say that they're Islamists, and they are. They are all of that. You know what I'm saying? But you cannot say that the Palestinians didn't choose that destiny. That was their choice. But because for that choice, do they deserve to die? No, they don't. And then Candace Owens started to go into other things within the Jewish religion that might motivate someone to be xenophobic in the way that the Israelis are xenophobic toward the Palestinians. For example, the belief among Orthodox Jewish people that non-Jewish people, goyim, don't have souls and are basically like animals. This is a belief that is held by not all Jewish people, but by the Orthodox Jewish community that's within the Talmud, right? So when Candace Owens started to question those things, and when Candace Owens started to question, because like once you start to investigate it, as I've investigated the conflict, I've studied the conflict for years, you understand that hatred doesn't come out of a vacuum. Like you have a movement like in America, like the Nation of Islam, right? And the Nation of Islam has anti-white rhetoric. And you say to yourself, well, what will motivate someone to join this movement? What will motivate a movement like this to start? Did this just happen out of a vacuum, or was it something that white Americans did to black Americans that provoked this response. So once you start to look at it, you start to say, oh, well, that's the reason. And what's the motivating ideology behind that? The motivating ideology behind that in the American context is white supremacy. So then you say to yourself, okay, let's look at that through the Israeli-Palestinian lens. What's the motivating ideology behind Israel's founding? Is Zionism. Now, is Zionism just the belief that Jewish people should have a state of their own? Some would say that's the initial reason. But if that's, or that they should just return to live in Palestine. Well, they already lived in Palestine. Like nobody was blocking them. The Ottoman Empire invited mass amounts of Jewish people to settle in Palestine in the 1880s, and even before that, going back towards to the end of the Spanish Inquisition in the 1500s. So it wasn't only that, or was it the belief motivated by an extremist ideology, extremist view of Judaism that's already in Judaism? Like the Zionists didn't invent it. It already exists in Judaism, the idea of xenophobia towards non-Jewish people, the idea of hatred towards non-Jewish people. You know what I mean? Like all you have to do is go to an area that is predominantly Jewish versus an area, that they share with another ethnic group, and see how they interact with you. You know what I mean? As a non-Jewish person, as a goy, as it were, and they don't act friendly, they don't act kind, they don't act welcoming. So you got to say to yourself, why? What are the things that they believe in? What are the parts of the Jewish religion that could be motivating this attack? You know what I mean? Motivating their actions toward the Palestinians. And then you look at verses in the Talmud, parts of the Talmud that preach anti goyim, against the goyim, prejudice against non-Jewish people. Like I said, that we're animals, like we're cattle. And then at the end of days, according to their Jewish eschatology, we, the non-Jewish people, will be slaves to them. So they take this, which is in a religious context, and they apply it in a political context, and they create the ideology of revisionist Zionism, or strict Zionism, and they apply it to the Palestinians. You know what I mean? They put it in practical application. The Palestinians welcome them, and you're going to say, I know what you're going to say. I know the Zionist apologists are going to say, oh, well, there was no Palestine before 1964, right? The creation of use of the word Palestine. First, that's incorrect. Secondly, whether or not they call themselves Syrians, whether or not they call themselves Palestinian Arabs, which is short for Palestinian Arabs, right? Whether or not, it doesn't matter what they called themselves. The fact of the matter is there was a native population there. And people say, oh, well, like Robert Spencer, oh, well, there were people from other Arab countries during the Ottoman Empire or the Mamluk times, or any time, even, like they migrated from other regions like Jordan, like Syria, like Lebanon, like Egypt, right? But who cares, right? There wasn't defined borders at that time. You know what I mean? It was all part of the Ottoman Empire, and then it became part of the British or French protectorate after World War I. But they still shared the same religion, they still shared the same language, they still shared the same ethnic group. So, but the fact of the matter is, the Jewish population that came in from Eastern Europe after before World War I, starting from 1882 rather, they were from Eastern Europe. They didn't speak Arabic. They didn't want to assimilate with even the Arabic-speaking Jews that were already there. They set up separate communities adjacent to the Arabs. They set up separate workers' guild, the Histadrut, excluding the Arab population. And then, uh, when Arabs say, hey, wait a minute, you know, we let you come here and now you're taking over and now you're excluding us from our own society. Fuck that. And they respond back, then the Arab person is called a terrorist. How's that fair? Like, you started it by coming here and building a society, you know, based not on your religion. You took only part of your religion, because the Zionists that set up the state of Israel, the original Zionists, they were socialists, they were Marxists, they were leftists, they were not religious, right? They were atheistic, right? They just wanted Zionism as a nationalism, as an extremist ideology. So they just took the xenophobic part of their religion and they superimposed it into a political ideology. They really didn't care about religion. Much like the 9/11 hijackers really didn't care about religion. They said they were extremist Muslims and they were motivated by Islam, this idea of jihad, but they only took the idea of jihad, and they disregarded every other aspect of the religion, right? Or people like the KKK. The KKK claim they're Christian, right? But they don't follow the laws and the statutes of Jesus Christ, because if they did, they wouldn't have been racist, right? They wouldn't have did the racist things that they did towards other people, right? So Zionism works the same way. So when Candace Owens looks at the Zionist, right, and she says to herself, wait a minute, I'm employed by this Jewish person, whether it's in PragerU or whether it's in Daily Wire, and they're telling me to go along with this narrative of October 7th to present the Jewish people or the Israelis at the Nova Music Festival as innocent doves, right? Not justifying. Never have I heard Candace Owens ever justify that the attackers on October 7th were in the right. I never heard her say that. She's simply doing what she was trained to do. The same thing that she did with Black Lives Matter, the same thing she did with George Floyd, the same thing she did with Charlottesville. She's questioning the narrative. That's how Candace Owens got big. Remember, she's the red pill black girl. She was the one. She was the darling of the right when she was attacking black people, right? But now that she's attacking Zionists, now she's suddenly the devil. See the hypocrisy? Like, if you're going to question the narrative, so to speak, you're going to question the narrative on all this shit, right? You're going to question it on BLM. You're going to question it on George Floyd. You're going to question it on Islam. You're going to question it on Zionism. You're going to question everything. You're going to leave everything open to interpretation. But that's not what Ben Shapiro and the Daily Wire want, right? They want only the minorities to be questioned. They don't mind if you're questioning LGBTQ indoctrination, trans indoctrination, Islamic indoctrination, Black Lives Matter indoctrination. They don't care anything about that, right? They don't care if you question that. But if you question Israel, if you question Zionism, if you question Trump, if you question Israel's involvement with American politics and the Israel lobby, then you have an issue. And that's what a lot of people have a problem with. And obviously a lot of people support Candace on her new ventures. I don't see Candace as an anti-Semite because the things that she says, she doesn't say anything anti-Semitic in my opinion. You know what I'm saying? Like, she talks about things like the USS Liberty, the attack on USS Liberty in 1967 by the Israeli government. And I've called out Candace. I saw her as a shill one time, but I'm so proud of her now, how she's evolved and how she is now seeing things for herself and using the same tools that you taught her. And you on the right taught her, people like Charlie Kirk, people like Ben Shapiro. They taught her to question the orthodoxies and question the narrative. And she's doing that with regards to October 7th and with regards to America's influence on, American Israel's influence on the United States. I'm happy to see it. You know what I mean? Because it is kind of weird how Israel and the American APAC, the American Israel Political Action Committee, has such a hold on Israel. I mean, on American foreign policy. They have such a hold on American foreign policy. It's unbelievable. You know what I'm saying? Like no other country has this sort of hold on America, and it's like when you really look at Zionism and when you really look at the motivating ideology that um, that drives Israel, right? Because every nation has a motivating ideology, whether it be democracy, whether it be republicanism, whether it be fascism, whether it be communism. When you look at the ideology that drives the state of Israel, and you look at Zionism, it's basically it's racist. Zionism is a form of racism. You know, it is a form of discrimination. It's the belief that due to a religious interpretation, Jewish people of today, of modern society, are entitled to a land that their ancestors do not come from. They say their ancestors came from there. No, stop acting like people didn't. That when Jewish people were exiled, and by the way, even the whole exile thing after the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 A.D. comes into question from historians. Something I didn't even know. You know what I'm saying? I studied this conflict for years, and something I didn't even know. I always went by the orthodoxy. Okay, the Romans destroyed the temple in 70 A.D. The Second Jewish Revolt, Bar Kokhba Revolt, in 134 and 35 A.D. And then they were exiled into Europe and other parts of the Middle East. So I always bought into it, not really realizing that even if you take that narrative as it is, in face value, and you take it at face value, still, when they went into Europe, they did accept converts. Like now, there's a lot of walls between somebody wanting to convert to Judaism, like they want you to become Bnei Noach and stuff like that. You know, a lot of barriers for somebody wanting to be Jewish. But back then, in ancient times, that wasn't the case because it was either Judaism or paganism, right? It was Greco-Roman paganism or Judaism that or Zoroastrianism in some parts of the Middle East and the Mediterranean, right? There weren't that many options. Christianity didn't yet exist. Islam didn't yet exist. So a lot of European people became Jewish. So these are descendants of converts. Some points of the Khazar theory, which is a well-known theory that this group from Khazaria in Central Asia converted to Judaism in the 9th century, and the Ashkenazi Jews descend from them. The Ashkenazi Jews are the European Jews. Supposedly, according to the narrative, again, they were exiled out of the country of Israel, Judea. At the time, the name was changed officially to Palestine. But when they were exiled, according to their narrative, the Ashkenazi Jews went to France and Germany, to Europe. And the Ashkenaz is the progenitor of the German people in the Bible, in the book of Genesis. So that's the theory. But even if that were the case, even if a small group of people came from the Middle East and went into Europe and they started to procreate, you still had converts. So these people, these European Jews, are the descendants of converts. There were converts there, right? They call it ger in Hebrew. So these are people who are of European descent going into Israel in the 19th century. They're not the descendants. They're not the original people of the land. The original people of the land are the Palestinians, despite what you call them. If you call them Syrians, if you call them Palestinians, if you call them Arabs, if you call them Jews, people that used to be Jewish or Christian and converted to Islam under Islam, because Islam in in the 7th century under Omar ibn al-Khattab comes into the land, and we know how Islam operates. You know, you either accept Islam, you accept the jizya, or you get killed. So Islam operates like this, and this is probably what happened to these people, right? They either converted, most of them did, or they were killed off, the people that we now call the Palestinians. This is their history. So even if like the Ashkenazi Jews or the Sephardic Jews that went into Europe, even if they are like partially Middle Eastern, still they weren't there before. Like they still set it up as a settler colonialist project, right? This is how Herzl envisioned it. This is how Ben Gurion envisioned it. This is how they envisioned it. You know what I mean? So Candace Owens saying simply this, or saying how sometimes, you know, there's pedophilia in the Talmud, which there is. You know what I mean? I did a video years ago on Judaism, and somebody said to me, why you never mention that there's pedophilia in the Talmud, that you can marry somebody at the age of 3 in the Talmud, right? Which I should have, because they're always leveling this at Muslims. Western polemicists always come back with the accusation that Muhammad married Aisha when she was 9. And this is something that is true. This is not something that Muslims can refute. This is something that is true about the religion of Islam. But at the same time, is it not also worse true about the Talmud? They never criticized the Talmud, yet the Talmud has some of the worst xenophobic, some of the worst prejudicial lines towards non-believers that you can find in any holy book, probably worse than the Quran, right? And I always find, and Candace is a Christian. Candace is a Christian. She's not a Muslim, right? She's not a supporter of Islamic fundamentalism. She's had Muslims on her show, sure. People automatically, when you start saying these things, automatically when you start calling out Zionism, because we're allowed to criticize Christianity, and increasingly we're allowed to criticize Islam. Not in Muslim countries, because obviously the law, right? The Sharia. So we're allowed to criticize those things, but we're not allowed to criticize Judaism. I thought no idea was beyond reproach. You know, we're not allowed to criticize Zionism. You know, automatically someone is labeled as anti-Semitic simply for saying something, simply for saying, you know what, Israel's response to the attacks on October 7th is completely fucked up. Look, we said it about our own self. We criticized American foreign policy in the response to 9/11. You know, yeah, Afghanistan was harboring Osama bin Laden, but once we got Osama bin Laden, why were we still there? What does that have to do with Iraq? What does that have to do with Libya? Were you just attacking them because they were Muslim, right? So if we question ourselves, and we're allowed to question the narrative of our own foreign policy with regards to it, why aren't we allowed to question, you know, the influence that Israel has on us? If we could sit here, and like I have before, and I've even got into it with Lisa and other people on the channel about America supporting Ukraine. I said we gotta cut foreign aid to Ukraine. We can't allow ourselves to be slave masters to Vladimir Zelensky in the confrontation he had with Donald Trump. So we can't allow that, right? And in Judaism's relation to pedophilia, don't forget, you know, everybody's talking about the Epstein list. Who was on that Epstein list? Trump, right? What was Epstein? Epstein wasn't a Mossad agent. It's completely obvious. You cannot get away from that fact. And saying that doesn't justify what was done on October the 7th, right? It doesn't justify the attacks on October the 7th. And never have I heard Candace Owens say that you know, that Israel deserved it on October the 7th. She's simply saying, listen, this is a country that they don't believe in Judeo-Christian values, the make-believe Judeo-Christian values. They don't believe in that, Okay? They do not believe in the so-called Judeo-Christian values because there's no such thing as Judeo-Christian values. Jewish people and Christian people don't believe the same thing. They believe something completely different. Yes, Christianity comes out of Judaism. So for a Christian to hate on Jewish people or to hate Jewish people is strange because Jesus was Jewish, right? But when you depart from that, when you're talking about rabbinical Judaism, when you're talking about the modern day form of Judaism that is practiced by Orthodox Jews like Ben Shapiro and Reform Jews and conservative and Reconstructionists, when you're talking about that particular sect of Judaism, you are essentially talking about something different. You know what I mean? You're talking about a different religion, differently than biblical Judaism when Christianity came out of. There's a divergence, and there's a divergence in about the third or fourth century with the creation of the Talmud. First in Jerusalem, the Jerusalem Talmud, and then later in Babylon, in Iraq, the Babylonian Talmud. We talked about the evolution of modern Judaism and how Judaism evolved. So you have Candace Owens questioning that, and you have them calling her an anti-Semite. You have them questioning America's relationship with Israel, but it hasn't stopped her. She has become even bigger despite that because a lot of people are waking up. You have Jewish people themselves, Dave Smith talking about he himself is Jewish, but he questions this because the American right, the conservative movement have exposed themselves that they're just as woke as the left. You know, the left has their secret cows. They have their sacred cows. You know, you can't talk about Black Lives Matter. You can't talk about George Floyd. You can't talk about the trans community. You can't talk about the LGBTQ community. And if you talk about any of that, you're labeled as a bigot. Well, we laugh at that as conservatives. You know, we laugh at that. We go, haha, that's funny, snowflakes, right? And we goat them. And we you know, you could post all day long about, you know, how you think, you know, justice for Irina Staruska, justice for Austin Metcalf, right? And talk about, you know, black fatigue and all that bullshit. But when somebody says the same thing about your secret cow, your favorite country in the Middle East, you blow a gasket. Every other country in the Middle East is fine to joke, right? Durka, the religion of peace, right? But at the end of the day, when somebody says something about your favorite country with these conservatives, they immediately accuse a person of bigotry. Isn't that the same thing the left does? So bigotry is fine when it's directed at trans people, gay people, Hispanics, black people, right? But bigotry is not okay when it's directed at Zionists, right? All of a sudden, questioning Zionism is equal to anti-Semitism. Well, how is that not the case with black people? How is questioning BLM not racism? How is questioning the violence in Islam not Islamophobia? Again, these double standards. You know, you had the right come out and the QAnon conspiracy. Suddenly, Hillary Clinton is connected to a pizza chain, Pizza Planet, that is a pedophile ring. But as soon as people start to say, "Wait a minute, what about Donald Trump on the Epstein list?" Oh, that's a hoax. Donald Trump not on the Epstein list. There's no Epstein list. But meanwhile, you were the one saying that Hillary Clinton and the Clintons had Epstein killed. Remember, hashtag Epstein didn't kill himself? Okay, fine. Double standards. I get it. You know, not me. I've talked about Candace Owens. I've come out against Candace Owens, but I've also praised Candace on many occasions. And she talks about um, her newest thing is the death of Charlie Kirk and how Charlie Kirk, you know, him turning against Israel because he was frustrated, and the group chat showed it. He was frustrated with the way that the Israel, that the pro-Israel advocates bully him. I mean, I don't know if he was going to convert to Catholicism because Candace Owens converted to Catholicism, right? I don't know if she was going to do that. I don't know if he was going to abandon Protestantism. I don't know if he was going to become, start speaking up against Zionism. Maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. We'll never know because you know what? Charlie Kirk is gone. Charlie Kirk is gone from this world. So saying, oh, Charlie would have did this, he would have did that, is like people saying Tupac would have did, or Biggie would have did, or Michael Jackson would have did. We don't know what they would have did because they're gone from the world. And unfortunately, Assassin's bullets took 3 out of 4 of the people that I just mentioned out of this world. So Candace says he would have did it. She was his close friend. She knows him better than we do. You know what I mean? And the chat shows it. Now, whether or not Israel had something to do with Charlie's assassination, we'll never know. You know what I'm saying? But the fact of the matter is he probably was getting fed up with them because he probably really did, buy into the BS of free speech. He probably believed that free speech was a thing, and he was starting to say, wait a minute, I'm not allowed to say the things that I want to say, and I'm a Christian. I can't be beholden to this Judeo-Christian BS because if you're a Christian, you care more about preaching the gospel of Christ and proclaiming the truth of Christ than you care about appeasing a nation that's not even Christian, that is in fact anti-Christian, a country where Christians are spit on. Okay, they'll say, oh, well, then how dare you side with the Muslims that are killing and Christians right now? First of all, that regime in Syria right now where the Christians are being slaughtered, guess who was an ally of that regime? Guess who had Ahmed al-Shara in his office taking pictures with Ahmed al-Shara? Lisa showed it to me yesterday. Donald Trump, he had Jelani right there. He was palling up with Jelani. And what was Jelani? Jelani, he worked for ISIS. He worked for Al-Qaeda. He worked for the terrorist organization that attacked us on 9/11. So if you're so against the mistreatment of Christians in Syria, and you're so a pro-advocate for the treatment of Christians at the hands of Islamists, then you would be anti-Trump because Trump supports Jelani. Trump supported the Taliban. He was all for the Taliban coming back into power, when he was negotiating the pullout, because he started the negotiations to the pullout, not Biden. Yeah, Biden fumbled it. I ain't gonna front. Biden fumbled that pullout in 2021 like a motherfucker. Right, but Trump was negotiating with the Taliban's leadership too. So you got to stop with the double standards. You know what I mean? Either you're for free speech and we can speak about everything, and we can't, or we can't. But obviously, there's a lot of people on the conservative right and on the left that are listening to what Tucker Carlson has to say, listening to what Candace Owens has to say, listening to what they have to say on the issue. And that doesn't make them Nazis. That doesn't make them anti-Semitic, and that doesn't make them against Jews. You want people to think that they're anti-Semitic. You want people to think that they're against Jews. But you know what? They're not against Jews. Just like anybody that criticizes BLM, which Candace Owens did criticize BLM, because people like Ben Shapiro and people like Charlie Kirk and the conservatives on the right used her as a black face to criticize BLM, because that's what they do. They'll get somebody like a Myron Gaines, like a Hodge twins or whatever, to criticize and say racist things about not just BLM as an organization, but black people as a whole. And they'll say, oh, well, see, they're telling the truth. Why, though? They're connected to these organizations. So this to me represents, Candace Owens' numbers represent to me people waking up from the Zionist propaganda. Mandani's election is another one in New York, waking up from the Zionist propaganda. Now, you could say Mandani's a socialist, right? He doesn't really represent political Islam, but I don't care because I don't like political Islam either. I don't want, and I've had this argument with Muslims. I've had this argument with Jews. Religion and politics should not mix. Ideologies like Zionism, ideologies like Hindutva, ideologies like Islamism, jihadism, they should not exist, right? Not that the religion shouldn't exist. It's cool for the religions to exist, but this extremist ideology directed at people of other faiths, they should not exist. White nationalism sucks. Zionism sucks. Hindutva sucks, and Islamism sucks. They all suck. You know what I mean? Because they all are an impetus to freedom of free people. If you love freedom and you love the ability to speak freely and the ability to control your own destiny, you would reject these political ideologies that are to the exclusion of people. And they're all in the same category, right? The white nationalists, groypers, I don't support them either. Nick Fuentes and them. I don't feel like Nick Fuentes and Candace are even on the same boat because we witnessed Candace Owens get now this is against Candace now. We witnessed her get a reality check when she sat across from Nick Fuentes and she tried to argue the typical Thomas Sowell, Larry Elder, black conservative argument. Oh, it's not, black people's problems are of our own making. You know what I mean? It's because of hip hop. It's because of welfare, because of Lyndon Johnson, the Great Society, right? Taking the father out of the home, the typical right-wing argument that you hear against black people all the time. And Nick Fuentes sat there, and Nick Fuentes proceeded to say, he took the mask off and he said, you know what? No, it's not because of that. It's because really genetically black people are inferior. And Candace Owens felt stupid because here is an actual white supremacist telling you, no, like, nah, like, we don't believe that. Like, we say that because that's the public polite thing to say. We say that. We say, okay, it's a meritocracy. It's civic nationalism. We blow the horn of civic nationalism out front, but behind your back, we really say, nah, it's not. No amount of acculturation, no amount of assimilation is going to make you white. So we really don't like you, not because, not because of your behavior, not because of hip hop, not because of Lyndon Johnson and the Great Society. We really don't like you because you're black, and we're never going to like you because you're black. Like Nick Fuentes told her this, you know what I'm saying? And she just had to sit there and look stupid because. So I'm against that. I'm against the Nick Fuenteses of the world. I'm against the Groypers, Thomas Rousseau, the Patriot Front. Like that Christian nationalism, that shit could go somewhere. The fucking Islamists like Jelani that Trump supports, or Al-Qaeda, people that blow themselves up because they believe 72 virgins are going to greet them in paradise. I'm against that too, right? People, the Zionists, that believe that Gentiles, non-Jews are animals and they don't have souls, and all the Palestinians deserve to die and need to be driven off their land. That's bullshit too. Fuck that. Like all Hindutva in India, the oppression of Muslims and Christians in India, by Narendra Modi's regime that Trump again supports. I'm against that. All this garbage, this is all garbage to me. You know what I'm saying? Like, not against Muslims, not against Jews, not against white people, not against Christians, but this idea that one group is inherently better than another and another group deserves to be oppressed because of that, these extremist ideologies, I'm against them all. You know what I'm saying? So when somebody like Candace Owens, who I don't agree with her views on Black Lives Matter. I don't agree with her assessment that black people are to blame for their own problems, because I believe that these problems are a result of historic injustices. You know what I mean? Like systemic racism. I do believe that there are systems in place that the actions in the past caused these kind of outcomes, just like with the Palestinians. The Palestinians have been oppressed for the last hundred years. So their response to Zionism is not, while not justified, is something that, if you were like, if you put yourself in the place of a black person in America or a Palestinian in Gaza, you know what I'm saying? How would you react to being in those types of situations? If Candace Owens can do that and have empathy for the Palestinians and their reaction to extremist Zionism in Gaza, maybe she can have empathy for black people and their response to white supremacy and oppression here in the United States. You know what I mean? Because to me, they go hand in hand, in my opinion. You know what I'm saying? That's not wokeism, in my opinion, because I'm not saying that all white people are evil. I'm not saying all Jewish people are evil. I'm just saying that when somebody has their boot on your neck and you react violently, you can't, the person that reacted violently, like if a dog is attacking me and I kill that dog, I can't then be blamed for killing that dog. But I can be blamed for killing that dog and his owner's kid. Because I know what you're going to come back with. You're going to say, well, what about the Zionists? They're justified in killing the Palestinians because of October 7th. Bullshit. They're not only killing enemy combatants, they're killing children. They're killing innocent people. Had nothing to do with October 7th. Catholic churches in Gaza had nothing to do with October 7th. You know that for a fact. The Islamists and Hamas would oppress the Catholics just as much as they would oppress the Jewish people. Come on, bullshit with the way the IDF reacted. So anyway, kudos to Candace Owens. I hope she continues to speak out. And I'm glad to see that she's coming around, and I agree with her on certain things. Now, on the black thing, I think in the future, she will come out and tell us the truth. That Ben Shapiro and other people on the right, like Dennis Prager, they pressured her to say these anti-black things. They pressured her to defame George Floyd and to defame, Breonna Taylor and the other victims of white supremacy. I think she will. I think she's coming around. Anyway, guys, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the bell button to see when my next video is coming out. Peace.